After a grueling but rewarding year, it's time for some indulgence. Time to let loose and shake a leg. The man heading Kenya's leading telco opens up to his reflections on the year that was and the days ahead. How do you manage to stay at the top, always considering you were able to record a 24 billion shillings profit after tax in your half-year results?
I think there are two things. The first one is having a great team. I was going to say a strong team, but actually at Safaricom we've got a great team. And the second thing is really focusing on ensuring that you understand the customers and you can meet their needs.
Okay. Mobile data and M-Pesa were the two factors that actually saw you meet the targets of 24 billion. How would you say, in terms of data growth, how have you been able to perform this year?
You know, we're getting more people using the internet and accessing the internet on smartphones. And as those customers grow, we've also effectively reduced the prices by about 17%. So that was the other thing. And then the final one is continuing to roll out the network. So now, you know, we're on the road to having about 1,000 4G base stations. And that makes a big difference because the speed helps.
You mentioned that you've actually reduced the cost of data, but Kenyans still are of the feeling that it could go lower. Is it something that you're working towards?
We're always working to that, yes. I mean, the prices are pretty close to the cost at the moment. As we build up more scale, more capacity, as more people come onto the network, we would expect to see the prices come down, of course.
Okay. And in order to boost the usage of data in the country, there are only I think it's less than 10 million people who have smartphones in the country. At Safaricom, are you playing any role in ensuring that more Kenyans are able to have smartphones?
Yes, we're working with the handset manufacturers, people like Techno, like Huawei, to get the cost of the handsets down. But also, you know, a lot of people are using 2G data because GPRS is also okay for people who can't afford to have a smartphone.
Safaricom may be the undisputed market leader, but the bigger challenge lies in staying ahead of a turbocharged chasing pack.
We have competition from the fixed providers. We also have competition from people like Facebook, WhatsApp, Google. So there's a whole load of, and of course we've also got competition from Uber. So there's a whole load of competitors these days. The market is evolving so quickly that we can't just think in the very parochial way that we've always done in the past.
Talking about the market evolving in various ways, we see telcos moving into content provision. Are you looking into that as well?
We're certainly working with content providers. We don't want to do content ourselves, but we're working with content providers to help them to distribute their content. So we see our role more as being that of a potential aggregator or a reseller of other people's content.
Okay, and from when are we supposed to see this content actually being used by some of the consumers?
We've been running a pilot, and last Friday we connected our first customers to Safaricom Fiber, which is delivered via overhead poles.
Okay. This year you've had quite a number of, let me call them hiccups, when we're looking at the late KPMG report and also some other issues that have to do with bloggers. What is your war with bloggers?
I don't have a war with bloggers. I think, you know, internationally there are issues around social media. Okay. If you look at the growth of fake news, for example, and the impact that these guys have had on things like the American election, I think there is a need to put some control around these things, because if you take conventional media, you know, there are rules to which you guys operate. But if there are no rules to which social media people operate, then, you know, we can have potentially big problems, especially as we come into our own elections next year.
Okay. There's a time where Safaricom was talking about the disposal of electronic wastes. As a country, what are we supposed to do when I'm done with my mobile phone, or rather I can no longer use it, my laptop? What are you doing about that?
So we have collection points around the country.
Okay.
And I think over the past year we've collected, one of my colleagues worked out that it's about 78, the equivalent of the weight of 78 elephants.
What?
And so we collect, you know, not just phones, but laptops, computers, TVs, and then we recycle as much as we can in Kenya.
We see that you've moved into, I don't know, call it banking space. Also, you're into insurance. What else are we expecting from Safaricom? Do you still consider Safaricom just a telco?
No, we don't. We don't
What
think
are
it's
you
Safaricom.
then?
We don't think of Safaricom as merely a telco, because the world is moving away from that kind of linear approach.
Okay.
You know, we think that if you wouldn't have thought of us as being a partner for a taxi hailing company, for example, which is what Little Cab is. So we certainly have a lot of plans around using the M-Pesa platform to support our partners to do more things.
We're looking at thousands of youths every other year graduating and they have no jobs. If you were to advise the government, which areas of sustainable jobs would you tell them to go into?
Manufacturing.
Why?
Because I don't think I can think of any country that lifted itself out of poverty without making things. You look at China, you look at anywhere in the kind of the Far East, Southeast Asia, you look at India, you have to make things. Because once we have access to free primary education, a lot of people are not even taking that up, never mind getting to learning a trade. So it's, you know, often people say to me, you know, what keeps you awake at night? That is an existential problem that really does keep me awake.
You just mentioned that Safaricom will be celebrating 16 years of doing business. What is your biggest frustration about doing business in this country?
Corruption.
And you've been very vocal about it.
Yeah, there's a few of us who have been very vocal about it. Having said that, you know, we've had some really great news this week, and that is that Parliament has finally passed the anti-corruption bill. This is the private sector anti-corruption bill. And so that's a really good start. Corruption is still very endemic at all levels. And, you know, I've never been shy to say that corruption exists in my company. And people look at me and they point, I say, of course. But unless you call it out, you're never going to be able to deal with it. And that's, I think, the biggest single problem.
Anything you find peculiar about the Kenyan market or the country as Kenya, that is?
No, I'm not going to fall into that trap. Michael did, and has lived to regret it. Look, I mean, you know, there are a number of things which are unique to the country and to the people, but you find that in every country, and I've been fortunate enough to live in a number of countries. They have a fantastic propensity for hard work and for enterprise. I call it enterprise and not entrepreneurism, because those two things get confused. The thing which I've really find difficult to come to terms with is the lack of punctuality and the lack of respect for time. I do find it frustrating that people can turn up an hour.
Is it a Kenyan problem, or do you think it's an African problem?
I think it's an African problem, actually. Yeah. And so that's the one thing which, and the other thing which is perhaps a little less serious, but the last minute nature of Kenyans.
Yes.
Whenever we have our jazz, for example, you know, I have a bit of a panic as we get towards Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, and
Thursday, Friday, so how many tickets have we sold? And you know, I would then start to panic, and Zahida would say to me, "It'll be fine, Bob. This is Kenya."
It's gonna be okay.
And it's always okay. You know, the last gig was sold out at 2,500 people. So that last minute thing gets me a little bit nervous sometimes, but I mean, that's less serious.
But what do you celebrate?
What do I celebrate? That's a very interesting question, which I never really thought about. I celebrate ignorance, not stupidity. They're two different things. Because ignorance, a recognition of ignorance, means that you will have a thirst for knowledge. Stupidity is different. And I think that I always assume that I don't know. And that way I go to find out.
That's quite impressive, I must say. Going into 2017 is an election year. Is there anything you're worried about?
Look, I think, you know, historically we've seen a dip in GDP growth in any election year. And, you know, there's nothing to suggest that that's not going to happen again this year. I think our politics, as I said, you know, it does tend to be toxic. And so I worry that there might be a contagion around, and I know people don't like me using it, but it's an English word, you know, that stupidity in politics. I worry that that contagion spreads.
I think your coffee is ready now. Do you watch what you eat?
I do watch what I eat, yes, I do. Because, you see, the problem with a job like this, with as much travel and as much corporate engagement, if you don't watch what you eat, you know, you're going to end up in a bad place. As a CEO, and this will apply to any other CEO, as a CEO, it's a 24 hours, 7 days a week job. And you have to be on top of it. If you're not, you're going to have a problem. You're going to get sick.
So that's a lot of salads, less meat.
I'm not a big meat eater. And actually, I don't have a huge appetite either. Nor alcohol. So I do drink alcohol, but I don't drink as much as you'd expect corporate life to force you into doing.
So if I followed that, I'd look this amazing at 40, right?
Flattery will get you everywhere.
But anyway, moving on. It's not just the taste of the Kenyan shilling that he loves.
I hope this is Kenyan coffee.
Exactly.
And there are things he would love to do differently, given a second chance.
I think there's some things that I wish I hadn't said. And perhaps expressing an honest view on some issues perhaps was a little bit unwise. But, I always think that being frank about it, because if you've asked me a question, then I'm assuming you want to have an honest answer.
Yeah,
so I guess there are one or two things perhaps I could have phrased differently.
More often than not, Bob, when I've met you and I've never seen you as you wait for someone on your phone or when you're just sitting somewhere relaxing, you're never using your phone, yet you're the CEO of Safaricom. How is that?
There's a paradox, huh? You'd expect that because I sell scratch cards, I would want people to be on their phones all the time. But I think that the device, whatever the device is, starts to get in the way of humanity. And you see people I see couples in restaurants and they're sending text messages to each other, or they're not engaged in the conversation. But when you're on your own, it's a time to get bored, and when you get bored, you think. But because we're all so scared of boredom, we don't have thinking time. And so I actually really enjoy not having my phone, not having my iPad, and just absorbing the world around me, but also just thinking about things.
What do you think about this habit that's come nowadays? There's Snapchat, there's Instagram, there is WhatsApp, there's all the time youths, especially the young people, are on their phone. What can you tell them?
I'll tell them to learn to speak to people. But also, not just young people, so don't be too hard on them.
Okay.
Parents do the same thing. You see, there's a thing called the pass back. So parents are driving, the kids are seeking attention in the back of the car, and you pass back the phone for the children to entertain themselves. So just remember that we're people first, and don't let that device. The device is really important, but don't let that device get in the way of some simple things like being bored and thinking.
What are you doing for Christmas and New Year's?
The thing that I enjoy most about Nairobi is Christmas. And so when everyone goes to the coast for Christmas, I enjoy Nairobi.
Okay. And New Year's?
And I paint, of course. I have an eye for detail. My mother is coming to visit me, which is nice, and I'm looking forward to that because we haven't been able to spend as much time. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, let the world know I Bob Collymore coffee.
So, let me leave you some money for the coffee.
I don't want it.
How much is the coffee?
I can't stop the nothing I can see but you when you dance. Feel good creeping up on you, so just dance.